Catherine Ham, Brian Wilson, Brian Neiman, today's newsmakers, and you. The Morning Majority, 630.
WMAL. It is 8:37. Hit me with your best shot, baby. Hey, listen, it's so good to be with you this morning. I've already started my holiday weekend.
It appears you have.
I have summer sausage and a hamburger and some apple pies.
Because it's 8:37, which is exactly the time for a burger and summer sausage.
Well, I've been up since 2. It's all right. This is my lunch. I had some macaroni salad and food down the hall.
And anyway. 5 Miller Lights, but we won't get into that.
And I want to add a perfect heart still.
Right.
Even still. Hey, listen, we want to talk to Jim Engel from your Fox News channel, who's on the line right now. He is the senior Washington correspondent, an all-around good guy because he comes from the great state of Texas.
That's true, and you're making me hungry.
Yeah, well, listen.
Stop on by,
Come
man.
on by. We got chow. Don't worry about it. Jim, there was a story on foxnews.com that had your name attached to it that we all here had a great deal of fun with earlier this week. I wanted to talk to you about it. It has to do with the state of Maryland now imposing a requirement for all graduating seniors that they have to do something to learn about the environment before they can actually be allowed to graduate. What's been the reaction to that story?
Well, the requirement, which is rather vague, is for environmental literacy.
Yeah.
Now, mind you, so there's sort of that general thing, but it is not a separate course. It's not any kind of separate work. It's supposed to be woven into all the other courses. No one knows how this is going to work. No one knows how it's going to happen.
Well, we know what's going to happen, don't we?
Well, you might have a pretty good idea of how it's going to play out depending on where you are. Now, if you live along the Chesapeake Bay, you might take students out, to look at the quality of the water and talk to oystermen and that sort of thing. If you live in another part of the state, it might be about agricultural lands. But the point is that the State Board of Education is issuing this edict. This is not an act of the legislature. This is the State Board of Education, but they leave it up to the local boards of education to figure out how to implement it.
And so most of these local boards, not having any extra budget right now, will likely just turn to environmental groups and say, hey, you got anything to help us out with on this?
Well, and in fact, there are environmental groups who are already ready.
You bet they are.
In case someone needed to turn to them.
They probably had something to do with it to begin with.
Well, it's quite possible, and they basically lay out things, and, it's you hear references to limits on growth and that sort of thing. So that's what's like to happen. But the other thing about it, Brian, is that, look, what is it that we are now teaching, that the school boards are now teaching, that they can do without in order to inject this into the curriculum?
That's a great point.
And that is one of the things people say, well, wait a minute, if you're going to do all this stuff, then what are you dropping instead? So that's one of the questions about this. There's no guidance on this. It is all very vague. They're the first state to do it, but there are 48 other states that are being encouraged.
That's what I was going to ask you. Do we know why Maryland was the first state, or is there a group that's pushing this to school boards and states across the country? Because I know in your article you said that there were 40 other states that were being asked to do this. I mean, who was doing the asking, and why was Maryland the first?
Well, there's a National Association on Environmental Education that has obviously done a lot of work on this, and is the one I was mentioning earlier that has a whole proposal for school boards that they could take as not quite as a template for what they're teaching, but as a guide for how to approach this. And I'm sure they're in part behind this. But there is a national movement to do this. The problem is you got to figure out, so what are they teaching? Mm-hmm. And if you're going to weave it into the coursework instead of having a separate course, then what are you losing instead? There are lots of questions about how this would work, but there are obviously groups that are pushing this to happen around the country.
Jim, I wonder if you know anything about, Fox announced this new ensemble opinion show called The Five, which will replace Glenn Beck's show. You got any behind-the-scenes news on that? Who will appear, and will we get to see your shining face there?
No, I don't do any program announcements. That's all done out of New York, so don't get me in trouble.
You're a very wise man, Jim Engel.
I figured that might be the case.
You're a very wise man.
Hey, it's all I can do to keep up with the debt ceiling negotiations.
Speaking of those issues, where does it stand? I mean, August 2nd is this deadline. Now, we've talked to several Republicans who don't seem to be too worried. We've talked to some economists who say, hey, it's not the end of the world. And then I've heard other people say, you know what, we better get something done, or at least a plan in place by August 2nd. I'm wondering what you're hearing on the Hill when it comes to that deadline actually meaning something.
Well, people are a little skeptical because they were first told by the Treasury Department that the deadline was going to be toward the end of March or no later than the middle of May. So you can excuse them for being a little skeptical and a little questioning about when the crunch actually comes. Most of the people I've talked to, including a lot of conservatives, say, yep, sometime in August it starts to get difficult. You can still pay bills. You can still pay the interest on the debt. You can still pay Social Security, Medicare, Medicaid, all the entitlement programs. But then there's not much left over for anything else. So at some point, you do start to hit a crunch. It's not clear when it would be. You won't know until you get tax collections toward the end of July. But I'll tell you, one thing about the debate right now is that we're in the theatrical phase of
yes,
this operation. You look up on Capitol Hill and you see for days this week we had Democrats out there railing against one tax deduction or another. Now, we're talking about trying to cut $2 to $4 trillion, and they're talking about things that cost $100 million over 10 years or $3 billion over 10 years. Let me give you a couple examples because this is a dandy. Look, you've got the racehorse tax deduction, the accelerated depreciation. That's $136 million over 10 years. A lot was made of that, though you didn't hear some people from New York who also have a lot of racetracks talking about it. But that's $136 million over 10 years. Not going to get you very far toward a $2 or $4 trillion goal. You had people talking about the accelerated depreciation for corporate jets.
Yeah, that's a favorite of mine. What do you know about that?
Over 10 years, Brian, and get this. That was extended in the president's own stimulus program.
Yes.
So
the man has a lot of audacity, doesn't he?
The president's up at a news conference ridiculing this thing, which he himself extended in his own stimulus.
Which I believe House Republicans voted against en masse if it was part of the stimulus.
There's one even worse, and that is that Democrats were calling for a change in an accounting practice called LIFO, which determines how you deduct things and calculate your profits if you're a small business. According to the Small Business Administration, in the Obama administration, if you were to eliminate that, as Democrats are suggesting, they had previously said it would result in tax increases for small businesses that could ultimately force many of them to close. Now, small businesses are the ones who create jobs.
Economic engine of this country.
They are the ones who create the jobs in this country. And here we are talking about, this is less than that, this is a little accounting thing, no problem. And the administration itself has determined that it would cause many businesses to close, and that would clearly affect job creation. So, look, there's all kinds of wacky stuff going on the Hill right now out in public. Let's hope that the things that are going on behind the scenes are more serious than what we've seen.
All right, Jim. Great to have you on. We really appreciate it.
God, good to be with you.
Hey, thanks, Jim.
Jim Angle, Fox News Channel, here with the morning.